Okay, we're here with Keith McHenry, co-founder of Food Not Bombs. I met you in the 80s during the Nevada test site.
Right.
Many years ago.
Yeah, that would have been in 88, I believe. Yeah.
You were going around and asking people who want miso soup.
Yes.
And you came up to me, you want to miso soup. Oh, how much is it? It's free. And I was really shocked. So Food Not Bombs, so how did you stay involved after all these years without getting burnt out?
Well, I think it's a couple of things. One, the people that you meet are really inspiring to work with. And I think that's one of the things. The other thing is that the way that the world is organized and everything with wars and poverty and so on, I just feel like I just have to do something about it. And so every morning when I wake up and I hear something on the radio or something about what's going on, I'm just like, oh man, I've got to be involved and try to change society. I think another thing was actually being arrested and being in jail really helped me because I started to realize that every minute I was out of jail was so important that I wanted to make the most of my time outside of jail. I did about 500 days just for feeding people in San Francisco, and I spent time in other jails. And so I had this real wow, I gotta make every moment count. And every once in a while I'll go, I have this thing called post-traumatic cooking disorder, where I'll go, I can't cook for 200 people a day, it's too much. I get to the kitchen, I start to do it, and I overcome that. And it's just so that might be every year or two I get this, what I call post-traumatic cooking disorder, and then it goes away as soon as I get in the kitchen, and then you go, and just the whole beauty of going out on the streets with all this food and meeting all these people, and it's all kinds of bizarre things happen at every meal, and so I just love that. So the other thing is, unlike most people, the disaster of climate change, the advent of total fascism, the horror of all these wars, I don't get this oh, it's so overwhelming I can't deal with it. It just inspires me. I've got to do something about it. It kind of gives me energy. So that is something in my nature that's somehow different than I think for a lot of other people. It freaks them out. That it just becomes a burden. It becomes too upsetting. It becomes too sad. And for me, it just is a challenge. Can I, with the little resources I have, make a difference and have some kind of impact? And then on the other hand, I can see that when I started sharing vegan meals, there was almost nobody was vegan. Now there's magazines called Veg News and all these things. There's vegans all over the world. I started Food Not Bombs with my friends at a time when there was this burnout from the Vietnam War protesting, and the war wasn't happening, so therefore it's resolved, and people were trying to make money and become yuppies. And there was almost no political organizing and activity, relatively speaking. It just gives me a lot of energy to see that there's a lot more going on. It just keeps getting bigger, and more and more people are organizing. There's more social movements. There's all this pushback and protest, and it just keeps expanding. So I just feel like it's not futile to keep organizing. So I think that helps me a lot too.
When people think about Food Not Bomb, they just think about all you guys do is serve food. What else are there activities does Food Not Bombs do besides giving out free food?
Yeah, well, Food Not Bombs, we have the three principles that the food is vegan and free to everyone, rich or poor, drunk or sober. But also that Food Not Bombs is not, and that Food Not Bombs has no leaders and no headquarters. But most importantly, and possibly, is that Food Not Bombs is not a charity that is dedicated to changing society. So to taking nonviolent direct action to change society, so no one has to live on the streets or in soup kitchens. And what that means is that not only, for example, we were involved in helping organize kitchens during Occupy and help building for Occupy. And we had kitchens in, I think, roughly 300 cities in the world, is what I recall at the time, that were not called Food Not Bombs, but it was the Food Not Bombs activists that, like, we had the logistics, we had the equipment, we knew we had the food. We were able to help organize these 99% cafes and things like that at Occupy. Or with the anti-war movement, we would go and they'd bring out food and help build efforts against, like at the beginning of the Iraq War. Mm-hmm. Or, when, like in Ferguson, when Black Lives Matter was happening, Food Not Bombs, St. Louis would come out and bring food to the protests to help keep the protests going. So it's food related, but it's also feeding the movement and logistical support. The other thing is that we've been involved in a lot of relief efforts. So you yourself might have been involved in the Northridge earthquake feedings. I don't know, were you doing that?
No, not
but so Food Not Bombs was out of Northridge doing feeding survivors of that.
Long Beach was doing that at that time, but I was not.
But you were not in Long
Yes.
Beach, okay. And then there was also the Loma Prieta earthquake up here. For the first 3 days, we were doing food here. We had a kitchen and fed thousands of people after Sandy in New York City, in Brooklyn, and in Staten Island. And then we also did a lot of Katrina. We actually had a huge operation feeding people. The Red Cross was giving out our toll-free number for the survivors of Katrina. So that happened all through that time as well. So disaster relief has been something Food Not Bombs has been involved in. And then we've also been involved in squatting. So we were Yeah, we did like Homes Not Jails. So Food Not Bombs was kind of us and the San Francisco Tenants Union would take over like 400 buildings in San Francisco during the savings and loan crisis. We were very involved in pirate radio. Many Food Not Bombs activists did that. We were the co-founders, so we're really the founders of Indie Media.
Yes.
So we started that. We were in a coalition with October 22nd No Police Brutality movement. So we've also Food Not Lawns. We've helped organize like community gardens, Bikes Not Bombs. So we have like this whole variety of non-hierarchical ways of organizing our communities outside of the power structure, independent from the state and independent from corporate power as much as possible. And so we've just had that focus for 38 years at one level or another.
So in the late 80s to 90s, we used to see a lot of punk rockers and anarcho punks getting involved with Food Not Bombs, starting chapters of Food Not Bombs, different places. Mm-hmm. Why is that these days we don't see punk rockers getting involved with Food Not Bombs?
Well, actually, I think in the United States we do have a lot less. The punk scene in the U.S. does not seem as connected to anarcho-punk as it was. I would say that is not true, though, in other parts of the world. Particularly in Southeast Asia and the Philippines, the punk scene and Food Not Bombs, or in Indonesia, the punk scene and Food Not Bombs is like really tight. Or in Bangkok, Thailand, for example.
I've been seeing on your walls, and you always post pictures of punk being actively involved with Food Not Bombs.
Yeah.
Third world countries and stuff.
Yeah, like the anarcho-punk ideology is very strong in a lot of the world. Latin America, that's not so much for whatever reason the community that started up Lima, Peru, Food Not Bombs is kind of more animal rights organized and not so punk rock. Whereas in Mexico, punk scene and Food Not Bombs is very connected in most cases. Europe, you'll see like France, a lot of the punk scene and Food Not Bombs are connected there. And you see that also in a lot of Eastern Europe. But yeah, it's true. Like in the United States, even the punk scene itself has not seemed to be as vibrant as it once was. And I don't know what that's about, although the ethics and the ideas of Food Not Bombs and punk are still the same, And early on, Food Not Bombs, like when we first we were trying to get the punk scene and Food Not Bombs connected from the very beginning in 1980.
Yes. And you guys just go to the punk shows and set up booths?
Yeah, we'd set up booths at every punk show. We would organize punk concerts. We would have free concerts featuring punk bands. We were able to get a lot of punk bands, so we used to have house bands, so to speak, like Bad Brains and Fugazi in DC, MDC. And,
those were huge concerts too.
Yeah, huge. Fugazi, we had 18,000 people show up to our 20th anniversary celebration in Dolores Park. We had, so everywhere there was always a band, a couple of bands, Dead Kennedys, when Jello Biafra was involved, and we'd have, Propagandi was like a kind of Food Not Bombs house band. Fat Records, almost everything that they put out, they would have liner notes for Food Not Bombs and their albums, and there's a lot of Food Not Bombs punk songs. La Mirma in Mexico.
And the compilation cassette tapes.
Compilation, yeah, it was so big. So I don't know why the punk scene is not quite so strong in the U.S. right now as it once was. It still does exist, of course, but it somehow, has morphed into. It could be because the economy is so crappy right now that people feel like they can't be too punk or they won't be able to be employed or something like that. Could be like that.
Just to rewind a little bit back to the Philippines, all those punks got arrested. What is going on with that thing?
Okay, so what is happening?
Food Not Bombs.
The Food Not Bombs. So when the dictator came to power, Duterte, he announced that he was going to have a war on drugs, and he told everyone, go out and start killing drug dealers. We're not going to arrest you or investigate for homicide. And the police department started working with the federal government to do that. And so he comes from Davos, Philippines, a southern city, where Food Not Bombs has been active for, I think, over almost 20 years. And he was the mayor of that city, and he was brutal. And so the Food Not Bombs, two of the Food Not Bombs volunteers, when they went home, the police followed them to the house. And they broke in, tortured them with cigarettes and so on, and eventually killed both of them as part of the drug war. And then two people up in a community north of Manila were also, they were lured away. A lot of people in the Philippines, Food Not Bombs movement, make a living by being tricycle operators. It's like a little small taxi. And for like a couple of pesos, you take someone across town, and the very essential part of transportation. Many Food Not Bombs groups actually transport their food in these motorized tricycles. And so they were hired by somebody who was actually working with the police and went to some location that they were hired to take them to. It turned out the police were there. When they got there, they were shot to death. And so then another one of our volunteers has ended up was framed on the drug war and been put in prison. And so there's a campaign to get him out. And there's been a lot more brutal murders even of other people, like lawyers and journalists in the drug war, since our volunteers were killed, two of them in July and two in September of 2018. And so there's a national day of protest on November 17th, or worldwide day of protest on November 17th against state violence and against the murder of people in the Philippines. And we're here at the California Food Not Bombs gathering, and we're pointing out there's a similar thing going on in Mexico, and Food Not Bombs people have been killed, fortunately, in that war. But this using the drug war as an excuse to kill political opponents in different countries is definitely growing, and we see that Trump has supported the Filipino extrajudicial murders. We see that the new president of Brazil has spoken favorably of starting that campaign in Brazil. We see that the government of Hungary is giving lip service to that. This is becoming a way that fascist governments are starting to give the green light that, maybe people are on drugs and therefore we can just start killing them, and whether they are or not, we don't need to have trials, and we just unleash the right wing in our community, give them guns, give them protection, let them start killing the opponents to the state.
Because food not bombs are radical political groups that are going after it.
Because food not bombs is like saying we can act. So, you know, the Filipino government is not ending hunger in the Philippines. Poverty is massive. When there's been cyclones, the government hardly has much impact at all often, and the food not bombs is on the front lines. So it's a threat because it's getting ideas to the actual most marginalized people of the Philippines or of the United States or of Mexico. That we, you know, poor people really should be in charge of their own destiny, because you cannot expect the corporations and the governments that support them to actually care about our interests.
Long time ago, did you ever thought the food not bomb was going to go international?
No, when we were doing food up, first of all,
did you guys plan it that, or just
no,
happened?
we were like, so food not bombs with Boston, and we were trying really hard to get one in DC and one in Amherst, Massachusetts, you know, and that for the first 8 years we were like, wouldn't that be great? And it never happened, and then I moved to San Francisco and I started the second group there, and at the same time, oddly enough,
Boston's first, San Francisco
second,
and we were third, right?
when you were third, although you were like, actually Long Beach was almost exactly the same second as San Francisco without us communicating verbally or by mail or anything. So the people, you guys in Long Beach were calling yourself Bread Not Bombs.
Yes, and we changed the name to
Food Not Bombs, because I was like, oh, you should change your name to Food Not Bombs. Then there'll be 3 groups: one in Long Beach, one in San Francisco, one in and then the odd thing was, like 6 months later, Food Not Bombs gets arrested in San Francisco, and it ends up on we got on CNN and the London Times and New York Times stuff.
They went all over the state.
People are like, we're going to do something. And I made this flyer called 7 Steps to Starting a Food Not Bombs, and I would mail it to people, because back then there was only mail and the phone. And people, and then by 92 there was groups in Brixton. Czechoslovakia was still called Czechoslovakia. There was in Prague. Now there's a lot of groups in the Czech Republic, and there's a lot of groups in Slovakia. And then there was a group in Melbourne, Australia, which still shared to this day, Victoria, British Columbia, and so it was kind of international by '92. And then there was more arrests, and punk bands are touring, and so that's how the Filipino group started. It was a punk band toured, and they said, hey, we do food not bombs in Europe. Why don't you do it over here? We'll show you. And then all of a sudden it happened. Same thing in Indonesia. And so it's now it's estimated that it's roughly 1,000 groups in the world, and that since we count at least 65 countries where food not bombs is active today. But there's no way at the time, like for instance, the Soviet Union existed. China was the U.S. had just started doing business with China, with Nixon and whatever that was, like 72 or something. So there was a lot of the world where it was assumed you never would be able to go. And, East Germany existed, Yugoslavia, there was no way, now we have like super active groups in all the Eastern European countries. Never occurred to me there'd be food not bombs all over Turkey, like Africa. I didn't even hardly know any names of countries in Africa at the time we started food not bombs, So it's like, it's like crazy how it's become a global thing.
Well, that's Keith McHenry from Food Not Bombs. Thank you very much,
Thank you
sir.
for having me.
And I wish you all the best.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thanks for all your projects you're doing. It's beautiful. Yay!